So here I'll be going over our very first Mythic Queen Azshara kill. Throughout the video, I'm not really going to be explaining what all of the mechanics do, but I'm going to explain how we chose to deal with them as a raid. I also have the sound muted for the first like 45 seconds. I got an ad during our kill attempt on Spotify, so it feels bad. So the first decision we made was to just tank Serenus where he stood, and we'd be moving 8th now. I've seen guilds do it both ways. We also never taunt swapped between Serenus and 8th and L. One tank would just take each. So I'd tank Serenus here. You can see this weak aura I have that would let me know when he's about to drop the purple shit on the ground. So the first Hulk's going to be spawning, and what we did for the Hulks is we had 2 fire mages. So one of the fire mages would be saving his combust for the first Hulk. But pretty much everything we did in P1 was really standard outside of where we chose to tank Serenus and 8th and L. So yeah, okay, that should be done by now. Awesome. So we just split the DPS. All melee be on Serenus, I think plus a hunter, then all range should be on 8th and L. When we brought them together is when we'd make up the discrepancy between the two. So I call for more dam on 8th and L. And the first really bad overlap's about to happen in P1, which is Beckett and Hulks at the same time. Beckett and Hulk in 3. So here we actually push Serenus a little bit too much. So you hear a raid called the stop dam on Serenus, because multiple times, if you push one of the bosses too fast, the other one enrages. That could lead to a wipe in P1. Basically, the target goal for the health on both of the ads is roughly anywhere from like 2 million to 1 million by the time the arcane orbs spawn, and we'd start executing as soon as the arcane orbs were out. Stop on anything else. You want to go for timing to soak the arcane orbs, but not to get this Beckett that's coming up in 15 seconds. Push. Yep, so pretty easy push. We'd all stack here on blue. Like most guilds that are progressing this boss, we had a weak aura to pretty much tell us exactly where to go with the Krees. A couple of them are still a little bit difficult, and I'll kind of explain one of them. So I got Moon, which is one of the trickier ones, because for Moon, you have basically 3 decrees, right? You have to soak an orb, you have to stand alone, but you also have to stand still. So you have to not be with other players. You have to be standing in this purple ring here, but you also have to be soaking this orb right here. So you get a little tricky, but with practice it becomes really simple. A lot of it comes down to the people here on blue, if they're far enough up. So I'd be tanking the boss first, and I'll go over our P2 strat, at least at the start. So we went for a specific timing, and what we found was easiest for our team was to use all CDs and pots for this phase. So I'd call here for second pots. So everyone in the raid second pots, unless some of the healers would use mana pots instead. So I'd taunt the boss in the middle, and then we'd keep the boss here at middle until the ads spawned. That's also the first taunt swap would happen. So ads are spawning, and we played around with a couple different builds for the ads. What we ended up on was 2 Demon Hunters kind of going for a big AoE build. Could pretty much handle the ads by themselves. But each team will have to do something different. So for the ads, I'll go back real quick. For the ads, we had a stun order rotation, which is, once again, it's going to be depending on your comp. So it'd be leg sweep, and we had Avenged Demon Hunter, so we'd chain them all together. I think we had a Demon Hunter stun, and one of our mages would blink across, and we'd had our priest use Shining Force, I believe is what it's called, to knock the ads back. And as a backup, I'd lay down my ring in case one of them
Force.
was still too high. So you call Force, I lay down my ring, it's not necessary. POV first. So the first dispels happen. So where we decided to do the spells pretty standard. There's a really handy weak aura that we made everyone in the raid get, which would say first, second, third, and then I would generally call them out as well, just to be ultra safe that we're doing them correctly. Next. And wall third. So for our dispels, we use 2 warlocks and then a mass dispel. Boss. So I take the boss back. Arcane Detonation will be coming up, so I took the boss at this particular time, so I could lay down my Transcendence and Transcendence back after the explosion, so the boss wouldn't move. Explodes at Transcendence, and the boss generally changed positions at all. Just a little bit. So here's pretty important. I call for a slow. The timing that we were going for was beating this beacon that's coming up, but still getting this Arcane Burst. So the way that the spell cane works is kind of weird. The highest the boss can be is 70.5% by the time Arcane Burst is coming out. If you push any slower than that, the way she does her intermission is you will get these beacons, and right after you get intermission, if you push too fast, intermission will start while you're still doing Arcane Burst. There's like this 5-second window, and we were slightly too fast, but we ended up doing the spells really, really quick, so it worked out. Pushing hard. Did you do these spells fast? So we do use the spells fast. We all stack on blue. And what we use here is a mass dispel. So you still did 2. Basically, the first person to go around this corner, they get Warlock dispelled, and the next 2 people would be a mass dispel on both, and then a Warlock pet on the side just to be extra safe. So we spell really fast. The players end up making it back to blue. We'll talk about this for just a second. So this whole strategy is somewhat of an arbitrary DPS check that we made. If you're struggling in this phase, you don't necessarily have to make it this fast. I have seen guilds do that beckon and then beat the ad cast. So right after, before intermission, she'll spawn 1 more round of devoted. And then after the beckons, so you can still do the beckons, push the boss before that devoted spawns, and you could actually save your pots. But we got really used to this strategy, so it didn't really seem worth it to move. So in this phase, the decrees were a little more painful. You can see like a lot of the raid has stacks, so this would get pretty dicey sometimes, but we were pretty clean on this pull. Good. So I would take the Myrmidon first. So we take Myrmidon and we pull him off to the side here. We keep boss relatively on the edge so players could still LOS if they wanted to. And we just nuke this first ad down. And then we decided to go on whichever side that the beam spawned. So you'll see here. Going so left this time. Beam's right, so we decided to go left. There are teams that will go to the same side no matter what, depending on your comps. Like range should be stacked somewhere, over here. I'd say we're always going left. Range should be on the other side of the beam, and mobile melee, that could get across the beam, like monks or warlocks or rogues. They'd still be able to make it over. But that's not what we did. Hi, boss. So I'll talk about our P3 strat just a little bit. We decided to play for a super slow P3, which you'll see here in a second. What we realized is a lot of guilds will be pushing to kill this second ad before the next beam spawns. But we decided not to make that DPS check. What this did was it extended our P3, which arguably P3 is the most difficult phase. But we'd rather do harder mechanics than rely on very clean DPS. So I would take the boss. So the rest of it's still over here. You can see they're about to kill first ad. So as soon as beam spawns, I would take boss. I would LOS over this pillar. We'd also drag Myrmidon over here. So at these 2 points, both tanks start off LOS of the raid. But we know that going in, so we could plan accordingly. So we'd bring boss over here, And what you could do is leave boss over here for the arcane detonation that's about to happen, and no matter where the players are running, they'll be safe from the arcane detonation. So they could be going from first ad to second ad, and at all times be safe from the explosion. The only time I got a little dicey is this Myrmidon would choose a player to put the spear on, so all the ranged had to be ready to run over to break the shield if necessary. I think on this pull I get the shield, or the spear, which was whatever. So I break shield, I have to move boss back into position. And the boss's position is really just a sweet spot, right? So you want the boss to be easy enough to DPS, but you want players to be consciously taking stacks, not accidentally taking stacks from being an LOS of the boss. And DeVito will be first. So something that you just gotta practice. So once again, I'll be calling out the dispels. Omega next.
Got boss.
Yep, so what we'd want to do, yeah, so I call for more dam on the Myrmidon. So we'd start DPSing this ad, but really our DPS check for this phase was killing this Myrmidon before next one spawned. You can see we lost a player already. We hit reincarn, so we kind of got lucky there. New Myrmidon spawning. These beacons that just went out are also kind of dicey. The way that we think the beacons work is there's like a grid over here, right? So depending on where the boss is, the beacon location can be anywhere in this grid. So if you're on the other side of this pillar, obviously the beacon cannot be inside the pillar, so it'd either be on this side or on the opposite side. If it was over here somewhere, it'd make it really hard for these players to do the beacons, as well as we're planning on dealing with this beam. So Warlock portals are not always going to be an option for you, which could kind of make for some very precise timings on the beacons. So new Myrmidon spawns, I take Myrmidon, and as soon as my taunt's back up is when I take the boss back, so you can see that my stacks have dropped. My boss. Overlap in 10 seconds, versus spell fast second. So I think this is the hardest part in P3 that's about to happen in 9 seconds. So I called the overlap's about to happen, and basically what's going to happen is we get Arcane Burst as well as Beckons, and there's going to be a Spirit coming out. So lots of damage. So we used our CDs accordingly, and what we did was we would do first dispel pretty much instantly as soon as they're around LOS. We'd wait on the second one for either the Beckon players to get out of LOS of the dispels, or just make sure the Beckon players' arcane vulnerabilities stacks have dropped off. That one's slow. See, shields just broke. Raid LOS is a shield break. I call for pain sub. This part of the fight's always just dicey for me because of all the damage that's about to come out. Wicked will be first. So we say Wicked's first. Wait on Daddy.
I got boss.
I call the wait on our Demon Hunter. Get Daddy. Yeah, we call for the third dispel, and the third dispel would just expire. So LS boss, and the beam just expired. So I get boss, and we head over to the third and final ad. Beckons in 10 seconds. So we'll pause here again. Once again, there's going to be another overlap. This time it's Beckons first, into Arcane Burst. So same thing, first one fast, kind of wait on the second one. We do end up losing a play in this phase, but it's because he was beckoned through the purple shit on the ground. Boss is at 54%, which is a really good percent to be entering this part of the phase. LOS the shield break. So spear. We'll pause here one more time. So on this ad in particular, it would always be one shield break, and pretty much insta, she would get a second shield up. So you do 2 shield breaks, then you can start working on this ad. When you get this ad on the right side, as compared to the left side, she will spawn her third shield faster than the ad on the left, so you have to kind of keep that in mind. So always be checking this ad's mana.
I got boss.
So here we do a swap. So we call for Aubrey first. You can see that Hunky Dory died. We could have or should have been a little slower on the dispel, but he also got back into through the shell on the ground, so he's taking extra damage. Get steal now. And 0 will expire. Break this shield. So we call for break the shield, then 0 expires. Alright, go hard on Bene, guys. Everyone swap. So LOS boss. does explosion, and we go hard on this ad. At this point in the fight, we just decided to tank boss on top of ad for easy cleave. You can see a boss at 52% already, which is a really awesome percent.
I got boss.
Good. So now at this point in the fight, this is when we chose to lust. Is as soon as we enter P4, we would lust, and it was every player's responsibility at some point to reset stacks during this phase. And ranged players would end up going where the boss spawns at the start of P2, and we'd have Warlock Portal going from here towards console, which you hear in a second.
Don't touch middle.
Right, fucking blast hard, boys. Come on. We got this shit.
Runes.
Yep, so players are starting to get in position. I DPS the boss for a little bit longer, and then here is kind of AFK for my stacks to reset. Waiting in 10 seconds. Click. So first bait, everyone's reset stacks. Everyone's gonna get to the console, reset stacks. So for the first click, I think it's one of the easiest clicks to do. Early on in prog, you can drop healing CDs here, but I think like we only used a rally here, and that was pretty much it. So I would tank boss pretty much on whatever side we ended the phase on. So let's say we ended over here. I just tank the boss on this side. Good. So you're ready to click 1, click 2, and click 3. So we do the clicks, and you can see the beam spawned. So what we decided to do was just follow the beam wherever it went with the ranged. So range should be baiting off here to the left. Follow the beam here, guys. Also, early on in prog, these piercing gazes. Watch eyes coming out. Eyes on boss. I would be very vocal about all the gazes, especially if they were going to be on boss. I think it's a very easy mechanic, but a lot of players start getting nervous. It's really easy to be, paying attention to 1,000 different things. I think like for your raid, just try to make this mechanic as easy as possible to dodge. So just be vocal about it. I2. So sometimes I call out numbers. I3 on boss. I call it if it's on boss. I4 going right. Care. Boss. So we taunt swap here. The next mechanic is the beckons, right? So the ranged players would be going off to this ward to bait. So we'd call, okay, we're baiting far right. It was their responsibility to drop stacks before this beckoned mechanic came out. Because you get pretty much nether portals and 2 beckons. So if this is in the beckon cast, and you have a couple seconds before portals will go down. And we made it a point for all priests to be ready to grip the beckon players into position, as well as all healers to be focusing the beckon players, because we would constantly lose people in this phase. We only had 1 paladin, so we couldn't double bop. But with some life grips and focus healing, it's
Cast of the blue.
definitely possible. One more thing to mention is, in this phase, we had a dedicated player to calling out all soaks, right? So one of our players, he just took the job. I honestly did not care about his DPS in P4. P4 like isn't as big of a DPS check as a lot of people make it out to be. You have plenty of time before that 4th console click. What matters a lot more is making sure that your wards are in the proper place for A, the console clicks, and B, you want to make sure the blue wards aren't too high of energy. If they're too high of energy, arcane missiles and the boss will just be killing the raid. Get guy up.
0 be bacon.
So here we're about to bait.
Guy has 3 stack.
Don't get guy up. Also on this, another note is we had a player die super early on in P4, and we still killed the DPS. So once again, it's not as big of a DPS check as it makes it out to be. Here it gets a little dicey. So you can see there's 3 mechanics that we're trying to avoid. There's this rotating beam that's coming towards the raid. Players just got done baiting, and there's this purple shit on the ground that really fucking hurts if you stand in it.
With laser.
Watch laser here. Laser's about to end. And at this point, all players go back to the console to reset stacks, because we're going to do our second click here. Reset stacks. Get ready for first click. Click 1. So here it gets kind of dicey for me. I'm at 1920 stacks. But I pop defensive and I'm okay.
Derek, Iron, and Ultra Ball, Mighty, Frizz.
Dodging eyes. So you can hear, once again, we're calling out to soak this console to get a little higher. As well as the next two mechanics are coming out. It's going to be the Piercing Gaze as well as the Nether Portals, right? So what we always did is wherever the second bait was is relatively where the third bait's going to be. So the third bait should be middle right. So the players want to kind of tuck themselves in over here. The second bait wasn't the best. The way the baits work is it'll always be on a grid. The first one spawns where players are standing here. So it went 1 and then it went 2. Ideally, this one would have been a little bit farther back, so it gave us more room in the middle. Baiting middle right in 12 seconds. So we're doing eyes and getting ready to bait. This is when it could also get kind of dicey.
I got boss.
I3 on boss. And we actually fucked this bait up pretty hard. Boss. So you can see there's plenty of ranged players not in position, right? Nether Portal is spawning in 0.4 seconds. We got a Shadow Priest over here. You can see healers still trying to get into position, and it actually puts us in a pretty dicey spot. Get back to boss, you're going to have to go long ways. So this is like, not worst case scenario, because it could have been on console, but this whole right half of the room is just, we cannot go here.
Go the inside.
So
I'm gonna die for Azshara before click.
yeah, so here we lost a couple players. That's totally expected. We lost 2 players. Both were just from the debuff, not from things they could have avoided. Get Frost up. So we call to get Frost up. He's the one clicking, that's why we're kind of hanging out for a minute. He's up. Click 1.
Use everything we have.
Yep, so
Click
this
2.
is as dangerous as it's going to get for
Click
healers.
3.
Fun.
Aubrey, 0,
Click 4.
Steel.
Also another note is we got really lucky with this beam. So you can see that it spawned left, which means that we'll be moving left, right? If the beam would have spawned the opposite way, if it spawned right, it would have cut us off completely in the room, and we might have wiped. It would have been really close. So we got lucky with this laser spawning. So next mechanics is the eyes, right? This is very important, right? Like, we're all kind of nervous. Just keep blasting, guys. You got this shit. Eyes.
Dodge.
On these eyes. Yeah. On boss. Big dodge there. On boss. Stack me 0. Dodge. Good.
Just stay
I got
alive.
boss.
Next set of mechanics are coming out, which this set of mechanics right here is what wiped us at 0.3%, I believe, is you get beckons and nether portals. You're really close to killing the boss, but if ranged bait these on top of the raid, we all die. Which
Immunities, potions, health
so
pots,
far to bait these mid, bait these mid. Yeah, we bait off here to the left.
There it is, boys.
Fuck yeah, dude! Fuck yeah!
God damn it!
Give me the fuck
Yeah, so we killed the boss. I think our kill time is around 10 minutes 50 seconds, which was relatively fast, all things considered. If you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out. I'll link my Twitch. If you guys need help with like the weak ores and things like that, reach out. I'll also post the weak ores that we used for the fight, at least some of them. And I'll also publish our Google Doc, which kind of has a lot of information about the fight. So thanks for watching.